live direct from the A&R studios. It's the Empire of Nerd podcast. Here's your host, the PokéTrooper.
Welcome back to the Empire of Nerd podcast. I am your host, the PokéTrooper, and today we are going to talk about Netflix's Masters of the Universe Revelations. Now, first things first, let's get it out of the way. He-Man has been removed from the title. It's not He-Man in the Master of the Universe. Master of the Universe Revelations. So, that should kind of tell you the direction they're going. Full spoilers ahead. So, you've been warned. If you don't want spoilers for this, at least the first part of the season, because it is 2 parts. It's going to be 2 parts, 5 episodes each. The first 5 episodes are on Netflix right now. Full spoilers ahead if you don't want to be spoiled. If you want to go into spoiler free, unbiased, make your own opinion, now's your chance to click off. But for those of you that don't care, honestly, I will say this much. If you're a fan of the original series, go back and watch the original series and then watch the first episode. And that's it. The first episode has to be... It's pretty damn good. Pretty damn good. I started watching. I was really excited. Fantastic stuff. Animation's great. Voice acting's great. The voice cast is amazing. You got people like Alicia Silverstone, Sarah Michelle Gellar. You also have like Christian Bader's in there, Liam Cunningham, Kevin Conroy's in there. Like, you have a lot of really good voice actors. The voice acting itself is really great. Animation's great. And then you get the story. And oh my goodness. Honestly, you could call this like He-Man The Last Jedi. Pretty much. It's pretty bad. Well, okay, let me start over here. Like, it's not terrible. Like I said, the first episode's really great. The characters, like, they're well written. You have I believe her name was Andra. I just barely finished watching it right now, so it's kind of like still going around. You have the new sidekick whose name is Andra. Like, she's kind of like the stand-in for... you can see her as a stand-in for new fans, where it's like she says things like, "Oh, like, I've heard stories about Grayskull and He-Man. Like, my dad would tell me stories, or my grandfather would tell me stories, and she's kind of there to like continue on this new journey with the new fans. So that's pretty cool. You have Teela, who honestly at times does get on your nerves. She's a little like, how would you... I guess she seems a little entitled. But when you take that aspect out of her character, like when you follow along the rest of the series, she's a well-written character. She's strong, she's not fearless, because there is an episode dealing with her fears, and she has to confront her own fears, and it kind of like makes her into a better person. But then by the next episode, she kind of regresses a bit, and so in a sense, like, all the work that would have been done story-wise for her, it kind of gets undone. But I'm sorry about the jump cut there, guys. My dog had to go out. Yeah, like I was saying, like, just Teela's a well-written character. Andra, she's kind of there along for the ride for like the new fans, or people that can be considered new fans. But this kind of is the Last Jedi of it's kind of like the Last Jedi. You have the returning characters who are now older, and they're kind of like being killed off or pushed aside, and it's... Well, let me get into the story. Let me get into the story here, and you can decide here. So, like I said, if you're a fan of the original series, watch the original series, watch the first episode, and be done with it. Like that's this. It's a good book ending. Like, okay, fuck it, whatever. So, it starts off with He-Man's leading off a couple of these creatures over to like Castle Grayskull. As to why, I don't know. He's leading them off to Castle Grayskull. And meanwhile, while that's happening, Tila's about to be like promoted to like official man at arms. So like, the highest, I guess, rank the soldiers have there in Eternia. And so you have man at arms there, and the king and queen, and you have the cavalcade of different characters, Orko, and then it kind of goes back and forth between He-Man at Castle Grayskull, and then the party going off here as everybody's celebrating. But then it really starts kicking off when it turns out that one of the creatures being led towards Castle Grayskull is actually Skeletor, and he attacks a sorceress. And then it turns out that He-Man that has with him is like a robot, which kind of like should kind of be like a hint as to what's coming up in the series. And so he's a robot. They start fighting. She sends a message to Prince Adam, who's there at the real Prince Adam, who's at the castle with his parents, with all this stuff. And she's like, "Hey, He-Man, I need your help, this and that." Which, again, going back to the Castle Grayskull scene, like Skeletor is really, really good. I mean, it has to be because Mark Hamill's voicing Skeletor this time around. And he doesn't have like that, yeah, He-Man, yeah. Like, he doesn't have like that funny. It's almost, I mean, the voice he uses is very Joker-esque, but like it seems to fit very perfectly with the character. Like, that's what you would expect Skeletor to sound like. But yeah, I mean, like I think that's why Skeletor is such a good, like, just a cool character around this time around. And so that's when he says like, "Hey, like, I've always been after the sword, but like I found like what I really need to do is like tear down Castle Grayskull brick by brick." And that's when you show the outside, and it's just like all these armies of Snake Mountain. And so the sorcerer sends the message to Prince Adam, who's at the party. And the other thing I liked about this was that in the original series, you always had just Prince Adam and He-Man, obviously the same person, but it's like, I guess it's supposed to be a secret that He-Man, or that Prince Adam is He-Man, but it's very much like Superman, where like Clark Kent's buff and tall and shit, and all he has is a pair of glasses. Same thing with Prince Adam. He's tall and buff, but all it is just a pink outfit. So this time around, Prince Adam is like very like slender and dopey, and like he's just like, you see him and you wouldn't expect He-Man. And then pulls out the sword and boom, gets all buff. And I like that. Like there's a clear difference. Like, yes, he's like this wimpy dude, but he gets all this power, like Shazam, or Captain Marvel. But that kicks off. And so Prince Adam turns into He-Man, and he jumps on the battle cat, and they take off. And Man at Arms tells Tila like, "Hey, lead the armies in this battle," and they go off to Castle Grayskull, and they're just fighting all these things, and it's really cool, man. And finally, they get into like inside the castle, and Tila starts fighting Evil Lyn, and it's just like I won't say the choreography is like the greatest, because it's still like whatever, but like they're exciting fights. You see them scoring off, and they're really exciting fights. And finally He-Man gets into like the basement level of Castle Grayskull, where like the power is held, and Skeletor tells him like, "Let this be our final battle," and it's pretty cool. Like, that's when they pretty much everything that's in the trailer that you see of them fighting, that's the whole fight. So the whole thing of like Skeletor shooting fire, and then when he fucking punches through that portal, and then the bigger portal comes out, and it's his bigger fist, and He-Man's like, "Oh," and he punches back, and they fist bump. And so all that's happening, and in the middle, like the whole area, there's like this pyramid, and the pyramid, there's like this hole that you obviously the sword's gonna go into. And so Skeletor's like, oh, like I'm gonna destroy it, blah 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 blah, whatever, villain stuff. And He-Man stabs him, and as he stabs him, he gets into the keyhole, and then opens up the triangle, the pyramid, and that's when it shows a little orb. And so Skeletor, swings his staff and smashes it, and right before everything can kick off, Sorceress shows up, and she's like, oh, I'm pausing time, because now I'm trying to contain the blast, but time is stronger than magic, so I can only hold it for a couple seconds. So they only have a couple seconds to figure out like something to do. And that's when He-Man's like, well, if I use the sword and use the magic words again while I'm in this form, like I can use it as a conduit and just like absorb all the energy. And they tell him like, hey, if you do this, you're gonna die. He goes, well, rather I die than everyone die. So he does it, power of Grayskull, I have the power. And then the sword splits in two, and he reverts back to his original form as Prince Adam. And that's when Teela learns that Prince Adam is He-Man. And then, big old blast, and it's just a big black scorch mark left behind by Skeletor and He-Man. And so it's just a staff of the head left from Skeletor's staff, that ram's horn thing. Evelyn picks it up, disappears, boom. They all go back, and that's when they break the news to the king and queen. Hey, He-Man's dead. And the king's like, oh, okay, well, that sucks. And that's when Man-at-Arms kind of tells them, like, hey, He-Man was Prince Adam. So obviously the queen knew, the cat knew, Man-at-Arms knew, but the king didn't know, and Teela didn't know. And so then Teela is like, well, why didn't I get to know? Like, how is it that you all knew, but I didn't know? And it's just like, that aspect of her character is just so annoying. Like, she's just like, well, I should have known because I'm his friend, and this and that, and blah, 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 blah. And it's just like, dude, like, okay. And that's kind of where the first episode ends. She's like, oh, well, I'm done too. Bam, throws her little headband away, and she leaves. She walks away. So that first episode, I mean, like I said, if you watch it, just watch that episode and just stop. Like, like, that first episode is so good, and that's pretty much most of the He-Man you're gonna get. Other than that, it's mostly like little 1 or 2 minute flashbacks per episode. Like I said, it's 5 episodes, so technically He-Man is in every episode, but it's only for like a minute, and probably not even that. The longest is probably a minute in a flashback. This is starting with the second episode. They show that once that orb was shattered, like all magic has left Eternia, and little by little, like all these magical creatures are dying. Orko's dying. Freaking Man-at-Arms gets like disgraced, like they like throw him out or whatever because he didn't tell the king about Prince Adam. And fucking now Teela is like kind of like this mercenary who like, or like a bounty hunter. No, like she's like, she always gets hired on to go look for like, these magical artifacts to bring back to people. And she's like, well, why do you guys continue to like trust in magic, like when we have, technology? And so now it becomes this very like, sorry about that. It becomes like this very, I don't want to say stereotypical, but it becomes like, it goes into like this old trope of like magic versus technology. And then that becomes like a big theme along the series, because once Skeletor disappears, like you have a bunch of like his old underlings and comrades, like they kind of split off and do their own thing. So in the end, it turns out that Evil Lyn is actually working with the sorcerers to protect like the last spark of magic. And Beastman is actually hanging out with Man-at-Arms, who built a robot. But then like Lockjaw and Triclops are like embracing the new technological age, and they have like this fountain of like these like data chips falling, and they would like scoop the data chips and they give it to people, and the people turn into like these little cyborgs, like they're half robot and shit. Like it's really crazy. And so it's really weird. Like the storyline kind of veers off. Like it brings up this whole point of like, oh yeah, technology's taking over. But it takes like a really big backseat after about the second or third episode, because then it's like that's when they learn that, oh, the swords, when they split, they return to their original locations. One sword went to Subternia, which is like the hell for Eternia, and then the other one went to Perternia, which is like heaven or paradise. And so that's when they're told, like, hey, we gotta return magic to the world. Like, you gotta go get those two swords, forge them together, and then, yeah, we're gonna solve everything. And so they go off on the adventure. It's Beastman, Evil Lyn, Orko, who's all weak, Tila, her friend Andra, who's like her new sidekick, and then Roboto, who's kind of like the stand-in for Man at Arms. Who Man at Arms was a really badass character in this series. Like, I wish they would have shown more of him, but they totally cut his ass out. And Beastman was kind of just like, like he was there for the ride, I guess. Really, he didn't really do anything cool. But yeah, like they go off on this whole thing. They get to the giant obelisk that leads into Subternia, and that they have to get in. They use Skeletor's like the head of his staff, and they go inside, and then they're kind of like in this hell. And each one, well, they get split up into three groups. Tila's on her own, then it's Orko and Evil Lyn, and then it's Andra, Beastman, and that dude Roboto, and they're gonna get off on their own thing. And so there's this moment between like Orko and Evil Lyn where Orko's explaining like, oh yeah, like my name's not really Orko, it was Oracle, but like I couldn't get any spells right and this and that. And like this kind of moment with like Evil Lyn where she's kind of like, yeah, like, you know what, but like you have it in you to like do this great stuff. And just like this like very like moment of like, well, like she might be like good, which it's a cool. I mean, again, it's a very like old trope, but like, it's a cool aspect to the lore, And so the whole time, with the other group with Beastman, Roboto, and Andra, it's just like they're just kind of like fighting generic zombies, nothing exciting. And then you get to the part with Tila, and she's fighting a character by the name of Scareglow, and he says like, "Oh, I have the sword," and he shows her the sword, and he goes, "If you want it, like you have to feed me your fears." And so she is forced to like face her fears of, so she's fighting like a ghost of He-Man. And then that's when Scareglow realizes like, oh, you're not afraid of not being important, but you're afraid of what you would have been. And so she was apparently afraid to be like a hero or whatever, so she had to face her fears of that. And she ends up getting the sword, and then she breaks a spell or whatever and brings everybody back together, and they're okay, well, let's get out of here. And Evil Lyn uses like the last bit of her magic to open the gate into Perternia. But then as they're escaping, Scareglow starts creating like all this stuff, and like the stalactites start falling, and they're about to kill everybody. And then Orko uses like the last of his strength to save everyone. And he's fighting with Scareglow, and he kind of starts trapping them and all this stuff. And they blow up, and everybody gets shot through the freaking portal into heaven. And then like the one little scrap of Orko comes in, so Orko's gone. He's dead. They get to Subternia, and they're like, oh, you have to talk to the original King Grayskull, and you have to talk to Hero. And oh, look, here's Prince Adam. And they're like, yeah, here's the sword, dude. Like, whatever. Like, use it and forge it back into the original sword. And so they use Roboto to forge it. He forges it back to the original sword. And then it's just the whole thing of like, oh, he's a robot. But then they're like, oh, well, when they built me, they did a miracle. And I can feel fear because I feel and this and that. And then everybody's sad. He dies. They forge the sword. And then they're like, well, the door only works one way. Like you're here, you're stuck here forever. But then King Grayskull's like, oh no, dude, like I have a thing in my tower. Like you can go back home anytime you want. We can send you back that way. And so they're all getting together. They're about to take off, and that's when Prince Adam's like, why don't you guys tell me what's happening in Eternia? Like, did my sacrifice mean anything? And then he's like, oh, well, you know what? Like, I'm not going to let you guys face this alone, this and that. And then that's when they tell him, oh, like, you were granted this reprieve and you were brought here to paradise upon your death. So if you leave now, you might not come back. So just take that with you. If you die now, like, you're just going to die as a mortal and just be stuck in the ground. He's like, whatever, like, I'm going to go, do this and this and that, blah, blah. So he goes back to Eternia with everybody. And they land right in the middle of a battle between Man-at-Arms and Triclops and like the techno monsters or whatever. And so they show up, they defeat the enemies, they go back inside, and they're like, oh, Prince Adam, say the magic words. And so Prince Adam grabs a sword and he starts it off, by the power of Grayskull, and then like everything starts coming back together, the grass starts growing again and magic starts growing. Castle Grayskull returns, the techno monsters kind of run away, they're like, oh, retreat, get out of here. And then as that's happening, the skull starts glowing inside of Evil Lynn's bag, and then right before Prince Adam can say I have the power, a spear goes through him, and it turns out that Skeletor lived, and he's like, oh, well, right before I was destroyed, I put my essence in Evil Lynn's staff, and that's how I survived. And then he gets the sword, and he says the magic words, and he becomes this character called Skelegod, and he's just a buffer version of Skeletor. And he tells, Evil Lynn, like, join me by my side. And she kind of has this moment of like, well, shouldn't I? And then in the end, she's like, yeah, okay, like, yeah, like, I was starting to like you kids anyway, like, whatever, like, I'm a bad guy. And then Beastman's just like, all right, good to have you back, Skeletor, whatever, dude. Cool. And so kind of that's where it ends, So from the get-go, I was really expecting a lot more He-Man. I mean, you see all the promotion, the trailers get really excited. And it's like, dude, like, there's no He-Man. Pretty much the trailer shows you the whole first episode. And that's it. After that, it's like, okay, dude, like, He-Man's out. Now it's gonna be Tila and her friend, which again, they're fairly well written characters. The character of Andros is a good stand-in for people new to the series, but they also don't make like any. They don't really say like how much time passed by, because then it seems like a lot of years have passed, because a lot, like, the Sorceress is like super old, Evil Lynn looks super old, and then like, Andrew's like, oh yeah, like, my dad told me stories about Castle Grayskull, and he told me stories of He-Man and of magic and things like that. But then Tila looks the same age, like, she hasn't aged, so it's kind of like, how much time has really passed in Eternia, and how has it like really affected everybody? Again, the fact that like they have to kill off characters or push off the old characters, it is very much in the vein of like The Last Jedi, where they're killing off, legacy characters to have these new characters take center stage. So it's kind of like, that's not necessarily what the fans wanted. And it shows, because even though it's got like a 94% Rotten Tomato score for the critics, the audience score is like 24%. Like, fans are not happy with it. And there's even this thing on Netflix, like, it's like the post show, where like Kevin Smith will come out and talk to someone from the episode. It's almost like another like Talking Dead. Like, think about it like that. And like, there's a couple times where he brags about killing. He brags a couple times that, oh, I got to kill He-Man twice. I think at one point he even said like, oh, I'm not even like a real fan of like He-Man and this and that. And it's kind of like, for a guy that kind of like builds his career on like, I'm one of the fans, like, he admits like he's not. So like, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you guys like, oh yeah, I'm a diehard He-Man fan. Like, no, not really. Like, I remember having some of the toys, and that's only because my brother was a fan of He-Man back in the day. So he had the toys, and then I got the toys eventually. So I didn't really know too much about He-Man. I know who He-Man was, and who Skeletor was. Lockjaw, Beastman, Man-at-Arms, things like that. But like I never sat there and watched He-Man or She-Ra, or those were before my time. So I didn't get to actually sit there and watch them. But I know who the characters were, and it's kind of like this series could have been a lot better. Like it could have been written a lot better. Like the whole thing of killing Prince Adam, like, okay, you could do that, but then maybe it's so full of just like old tropes. Like you could have thrown in another one. First episode, final battle, boom, Prince Adam gets killed. Okay, second episode, let's see how we got in this situation, and you jump back a couple, however long, and show the lead up to that, and then get to the fifth and final episode, repeat it, kill Prince Adam, and now part 2 is let's bring Prince Adam back. Let's bring He-Man back. That would have been a lot better. People have been waiting for a He-Man series for a long time, and this is what you give us. Like, sorry, buddy. Like, this isn't it. Again, like, this is my prediction for the next season. Because, like I said, I guess part 2 to season 1. It's going to be another 5 episodes. But it's like, okay, now Prince Adam is stabbed to the back. He's going to be mortally wounded. Or not mortally wounded, but he's going to be badly wounded. He's not going to be able to fight Skeletor. And so now it's going to fall into Teela to fight Skeletor. And she's going to gain the sword. And she's going to become the new champion. I don't want to say He-Man because it shows while they're in Preternia that, like, all the people there were the champions of that wielded the sword, but they didn't call each one He-Man. Like, there was King Grayskull, there was Hero, and then there was several other champions, but they didn't tell, like, oh, that's He-Man from this age, and that's He-Man from this age. So it's gonna be they're fighting Skeletor. They're gonna have to find a way to defeat Skeletor. It's gonna fall down to Teela, and Teela's gonna get the sword, and then Teela's gonna be the new champion. That's kind of how it's gonna be. I guarantee that's how it's gonna be. Which again, like I said earlier, like, that's kind of the clue we should have got when we seen that the title was Masters of the Universe Revelation. It's not He-Man in the Masters of the Universe. It's Masters of the Universe Revelation. Like, we should have known. Like, they sidelined He-Man in this one, and again, it's hard. I want to give this a bad score because it's like we're waiting for a He-Man show, but we kind of got it, but then we didn't really. And then, like, now that we're going to go into the next half of the season, we're still not going to get a He-Man show. But at the same time, it still was pretty well done. Like, again, animation's really good. The voice acting's great. The voice, like, the art, like, the voice artists, really great voice actors. I mean, really cool, just, like, fight scenes, things like that. But, like, the characterization sometimes, like I said, Prince Adam, they didn't just make him, like, wimpy looking, but, like, he's pretty dopey. Like, there's a scene where, like, they kind of go out of the way to show that, like, Teela is, in general, better than Prince Adam. Which again, I guess goes hand in hand with that whole thing I said earlier where, like, you see Prince Adam and he's, like, this not wimpy, but, like, he's, like, this just more slender build. Obviously not as athletic. And just kind of this corny dude. And then you see He-Man who's just, like, super tall, super buff. Warrior supreme, things like that. But, like, they kind of go out of the way a couple times to show that, like, Prince Adam was just kind of, like, dopey. Like, there's, like, when they're in Preternia, and, they're on these hoverboards, and they kind of, like I said, they make a point to show that, like, Teela's better at flying these than Prince Adam would be. And so, it's like you would expect Prince Adam to be at least some athletic to a certain point, or at least not such a, like, weak dude, because obviously he gets to wield the sword. He becomes He-Man, so you would think, like, the sword wouldn't necessarily, well, I mean, then you got things like Shazam, I guess, and that dude was kind of like dopey or whatever. But I don't know. Again, it falls into the same, very much the same tropes, and so I would have to say if I were to score this on a scale of let's keep it easy, 1 to 5, 0 to 5, I'd have to give it like maybe a 3. Like, again, good animation, half decent writing. You know, there were moments in this show where you're like, damn, that's pretty good. The first season, again, first episode, great. The episode where they're in Subternia and the moments between Orko and Evil Lyn, like those are really good moments, really good writing. But then you have like moments with like Tila, and you're just like, oh god, dude, like give me a break. Anja's very forgettable. Again, she's literally just a stand-in for new fans, or people new to the series. That's all she is. She's just kind of like, I've heard someone explain it as the what is it, the sexy lamp theory. If you can replace your female characters with a lamp and not tell a difference, like you did bad writing. I'm trying to think exactly how it works. So honestly, yeah, you could replace Andrew with any kind of like, pretty much any inanimate object, and you wouldn't tell a difference. Like, she's not the most well written character. She's just along for the ride. She's just kind of like, ooh, I heard stories. I can't believe it. Why would you use magic? We have technology. And, oh, look, I just conveniently deactivated the laser this time around. Like, she's not really... You could have gotten rid of her and left it just Tila, and that would have been fine. Like, just have her as her own, like, oh, you know, I don't trust anybody anymore. Like, I'm on my own, the lone wolf. Like, that would have been fine. You literally could have just done that, and the show, you wouldn't tell a difference. But she's, like I said, she's here as a stand-in for the new fans of the series. But again, voice acting is great. The voice cast is great. So I'll be a little more generous. 3.5 out of 5. Like, it's not terrible. It could be better. It has its faults, but we'll see. I mean, part 2 of season 1's coming out soon. Again, I think it's gonna be like another 5 episodes. I guarantee you that's what it's gonna be. We have to defeat Skeletor. Prince Adam's hurt. He doesn't have the sword. He's pretty much a useless weakling. We can't use him, so now it's falling to Tila. Tila gets the sword. Tila becomes the new champion. Prince Adam becomes King Adam, and that's it. So, like I said, do yourselves a favor. Just watch the first episode. Be done with it. Like, that's the kind of stuff that people came to watch. Just watch that. But other than that, guys, again, sorry for the drought of videos. My schedule is ridiculous right now. 6 days a week, like 12 to 13 hours a day. Like, it's nuts right now, guys. So I'm really trying to get a better schedule, and then we'll eventually have videos again coming out more regularly. But as always, like, subscribe, comment, share the video, follow us on Instagram. You know, let everybody know. Sorry, this has been a very rambly video. I guess I just finished watching the entire series, which takes about maybe 3 hours at the most if you include the post-show stuff. So, you know, again, follow the Instagram for the show. Mine is the PokéTrooper. Dr. Snake is at Los Sneakers. And until next time, guys, this has been the Empire of Nerd podcast. I'm the PokéTrooper. Smell you later, nerds.